So welcome everyone to the first of our Elevating Women in Leadership taster sessions. I hope you'll join us for all of them. We're going to be exploring different topics over the next 6 weeks. So I hope you've grabbed a cup of tea and settled down for this session. So my name is All Power, and I design and deliver our Elevating Women in Leadership programs. I'm also joined by Felicia, who's one of our facilitator team.
Hello,
and
everyone.
we've also got Mida, who's our producer for this session. So she set everything up, set the recording, and she'll be helping us monitor the chat. For those of you just joining, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and where you're based. It's been lovely to see such a wide variety of people from all over the place. So let's talk about what we're doing today. I did just want to mention next month we're celebrating International Women's Day on the 8th of March. I'm sure there'll be lots of events and news going on over those times. The theme this year is inspiring inclusion. And we're often asked, why have development specifically for women? And, well, research and data tells us that women face headwinds to progressing their careers to those more senior levels in organisations. So it can be a harder and slower journey for a whole variety of reasons. So our Elevating Women in Leadership programme is all about focusing on those specific areas that are particularly relevant to women to enable them to thrive on their career path, whatever they choose that to be. And inclusion is all about providing additional support where it's needed to create that level playing field for everyone. So our program's designed to focus on those leadership areas most relevant to women. So it's complementary and in addition to any leadership development that's available for everyone. So we really feel that it fits with that inclusion theme. So over the next 6 weeks, we're delighted to be sharing with you some mini sessions based on our Elevating Women in Leadership programme. So join us every Monday at the same time. This is our 3rd year of running these. So welcome back if you've joined before and are coming back for a refresher, and welcome if it's your first time. As well as these 4 workshops based on our Elevating Women in Leadership programme, the first 4, we've added 2 new sessions this year. So one on allyship, which is for anyone wishing to understand more about how to be an ally for women. So we're getting asked more and more for running these sessions on allyship. And we've also added one on mentoring, which is for anyone wishing to be a mentor for women, but also for women looking to understand how to select and work effectively with a mentor. So we've added these 2 additional sessions to the usual 4 that we run. So these 6 taster sessions are going to share what our Elevating Women in Leadership programs are about, and as much personal development and insights that Felicia and I can give you in the next 50 minutes. So hopefully lots of takeaways and useful things to get you thinking and reflecting about. We have sent out a worksheet for you to use afterwards. So that everything that we talk about is on those worksheets. So we're not going to be sharing the slides, but all of the points that we cover are on that worksheet and are things that you can go away and reflect on. For those of you joining for your own development, we do recommend that you find a buddy to talk through what comes up for you in these sessions. So someone that you trust, someone that you want to chat to about what we're going to be talking about. And an even better would be obviously to get a little group together and form your own little mini network and share what we've been talking about, and maybe start your own development group. I mentioned at the beginning we're on a webinar format because we usually have a large take-up on these sessions. So it is slightly different to our normal virtual learning platform. So it does limit a bit of interactivity. So we can't do breakout groups or anything, but we can use the polls and chat. So do be prepared. We'll be asking you to get involved as we go through. And we're aiming to complete within 50 minutes. So that leaves you enough time to get a refresh, probably before your next meeting. So we believe that development programs for women are an important lever in inclusivity, as I mentioned, and that levelling of the playing field. But on their own, they're not likely to solve that issue of greater diversity at senior levels. But when they're combined with organisationally creating a more inclusive culture and having positive practices that support women advancing, such as, you know, unbiased recruitment practices, flexible working. When you have these three things together, then there's a greater likelihood of success in terms of women progressing to those senior levels. And we do know from independent analysis that our Elevating Women in Leadership programs have an impact in three areas. So participants of this sort of development are 3 times more likely to be promoted when compared to women who don't attend or have access to any similar development. So participants of these programs and non-participants were interviewed, and the results were compared to get these findings. It was also found that retention rates were higher in those who've attended programs, and there's a higher instance of lateral moves, so those sideways moves. And this is important because one of the headwinds that can hold women back is a reluctance to take risks and see their skills as transferable. Often our confidence comes from a sort of deep expertise in our own area. And it's really important to have breadth across the business, as that's an important stepping stone to those more senior roles. So we need to be not just capital I shape and have that depth, but be capital T shaped and have that breadth across the business. And as I say, one of the impact was seeing more mobility sideways and across the business before then moving upwards. And how do we know what to focus on? Well, LHH did a big piece of research in the US and Europe, looking at organisations where women had been successful in progressing their careers. And we also looked at organisations where this had not been the case. And from this research, we identified 12 behaviours and beliefs of women who excel. And this is consistent with other academic research. So we believe that men and women should attend general leadership development programs, and that women's development programs should be a complementary top-up focused on the key areas most relevant specifically to women. So it's these 12 areas to focus on. And through our work with women, we've identified some of the challenges or headwinds that might slow that career acceleration. So we've developed a number of specific areas that form the basis of our development programs. And these are career activism, strengthening confidence and resilience, increasing impact and brand, and adding strategic value. So the first 4 taster sessions are going to take you on that development journey and explore each of these areas. So just to navigate us, let me show you the overall Elevating Women in Leadership programme journey and where we're going to be going over these few sessions. So our programmes start with some form of launch. So at its simplest, it would be an invitation and some information about the programme. It could also be a recorded welcome from the facilitators or a live event with speakers and an initial networking session. But at its heart, it's why your organisation is offering the programme and demonstrating senior sponsorship of it. We recommend that participants' line managers are briefed and onboarded, preferably through a live virtual webinar. I'll come back to that at the end of the session today. Prior to each workshop, participants get about 30 to 60 minutes of pre-work. We recommend each cohort is at least 15 and preferably 20 to enable creation of that broad network group. And each workshop's followed by a discovery session. And these are smaller group sessions which enable participants to share successes they've implemented since the workshop, or any personal challenge, so they can get support and coaching from the group. And we'll share more about that at our next session. We also recommend an assessment tool such as Strength Scope, which is introduced here before workshop 2, with a 360 element of it introduced before workshop 3. And our programs can end here for more sort of junior middle groups, but they also often cover module 4, which is adding strategic value. So today we are starting here with career activism. So let me hand over to Felicia to start us thinking about career activism and what this workshop's all about.
Thank you, Orla. Career activism, what does career activism mean? What we essentially want to support the participants with is giving them the opportunity to really think proactively about their careers. And what we find when we work with women leaders is that it's not something that they naturally do proactively. It often happens by chance. And so what we do with this particular module is give them the opportunity to really have some time to reflect and to understand more about their choices, and we support them with tools with regards to this. So what we do to begin with in this module is to, as the first module on the programme, is really give people the opportunity to work within what we call a psychologically safe space. I'm sure you've all heard that terminology before, but we really put effort into creating a safe environment and a confidential environment for people to really feel that they're able to get the best value from the programme, and we're able to do that quite well virtually. So in that, we'd like to get to know some of you a bit better, and we do that as we do on our programme by asking the question that I'm sure we've all been asked at some point in our life, probably when we were much younger. I know I was much younger when I was asked this question, which is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And this was normally by a relative, so it would be somebody like an uncle or an aunt or a grandparent, and we're just intrigued to get us insight into what that was for you. So why don't you just drop in the chat, just be very candid about what you said when you were asked what you want to do when you wanted to grow up. So what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up? I know mine was a dancer. I really wanted to be a dancer. I didn't think that was the right answer, but that's what I wanted to do. But and hopefully there's still time. Who knows?
Mine was a dancer as well, Felicia, but I wanted to be a belly dancer because I'd seen it in this film and I was obsessed with the little jewel in the tummy button. But my mum thought I said ballet dancer. And it was only when we were having this conversation years later, I was like, why did you make me go to ballet? And my mum was like, well, you always said you wanted to do ballet. I was like, no, belly dancing.
But mine was we're getting lots and lots of things coming through in this. Keep them going because you can all read the chat.
I've just seen a ballet dancing astronaut.
Yes, I saw that. Yes, I did see that. And so what we often find is when we start with that question is, so where did we end up? It's very much a question of where did we end up. So we might have had some thoughts about what we might want to do, and that, like I said, could have been when you were very young, could be because that's what you felt you wanted to do or what you felt others wanted you to do. But whatever it was, careers now very much are no longer linear. I mean, there was a time when it was all about sort of career progression and you went in a straight line. And we've got, for those of you who are familiar with the underground map in the UK, and for those of you who are not, it is basically a network. It's a network line for travel, and what we've tried to demonstrate here is how careers can progress. But in this day and age, careers are not very linear now. There are lots of organisations where it's a much flatter structure. So the idea of being able to go up in a straight vertical line becomes less of an option. And so as part of our career activism module, we really give people the opportunity through tools, through discussion, and we're going to go on to the actual modules in there, an opportunity to work through what it is that they want from their career and what might be their particular route. And what we've tended to find through the research that Orla referred to earlier, the research that LHH did, is that women tend to think about their careers in a very much more job-focused way. And men tend to think about their careers in a career-focused way. So what we aim to do is to support women on our programmes to really be proactive and active in thinking about that, and really thinking about what does their career look like, and what are the things that they need to be thinking about with regards to what they need to be putting in place to get them to whatever that destination might be. And that's what we work on with them. And so what we have as part of the programme is 5 areas that we ask participants to think about, and we work through with them and explore. And they cover elements that we have identified as key to the progression of careers, or even just the evaluation of your career. And it's really, we found it really helpful for them to have an opportunity to really think through them. And we're going to take you through those all those areas: politics, profile, manager, expectations, and networking. And we've put it together, as we describe, as sort of a model. And in the middle of that, it really relates to your achievement, your recognition, and your reward. And what we do throughout the programme is to take them, like I said, through those different elements and to give them an opportunity to think about how that impacts on their career choices. And the one that we're going to start with, or is going to take you through, is networking.
Brilliant. Thanks, Felicia. Yeah, just, if you've ever had that thought, if I work really hard and do a good job, someone will notice me. I've done that myself, but actually we need to be proactive. We look at others and think, why did they get that promotion or that opportunity and not me? So some of these might be some of the factors that mean other people's careers might be accelerating faster than yours, or why you might have a sense of feeling stuck. So as Felicia said, let's have a look at the first area. We're going to start with networking. We did find in our research that women who are successful in advancing to senior levels did have a stronger network than those who were less successful. So I'm just going to run through a few areas, and we're going to run a poll in a minute. So as I run through these, just think about whether you relate to any of these points, and Mida will run a poll for us in a second. So the first area is women tend to be under-mentored or sponsored. So just have a little think about that for a minute, whether you have been mentored, thought about mentoring, had that business sponsor. We tend not to seek out or ask for mentors. We'll talk more about this in the mentor session on the 25th of March. We prefer to network with our own gender. So this can be limiting if there are a few senior women to network with. We tend to have better organisational networks downwards. So we have good personal networks, people who'll support us when we're not having a good day. We have good operational networks when we want to get things done, but maybe we lack more senior connections upwards. And lastly, we avoid making asks of our network for ourselves. So we're givers rather than takers. So we don't necessarily ask our network for help, particularly in relation to our careers. So I see Mida's running the poll there. So we'll just have a little look and see what's coming out. So all of the above gets quite a lot at the moment, and avoiding making asks for yourself. So yes, Felicia, what do you hear women on programmes talk about in relation to networking?
Well, very much women tend to be okay at networks where either they're sort of networking laterally and with with sort of like-minded people, as it were, and also where they network where it's a sort of, you know, more collaborative environment.
Yeah.
And that's where they feel more comfortable, which I always say is fine sometimes, but actually it's really getting them to think about what's the object of the networking activity that they're doing, being more intentional about it. Because what I ask them to do is to recognise the opportunities that it could create for them by perhaps expanding their networks beyond the groups that I've just described.
Yeah, brilliant. And that's a really great point and a great tip as well about if you feel most comfortable networking from a collaborative perspective, so meetings or working on something, as Felicia said, start to look for opportunities where that collaboration is much broader and wider and more diverse. So really think about, if you're going to volunteer for something, make it deliberate and think, right, who am I going to be collaborating with, and are they going to add to my network in a wider way? So that's a great point. Okay, Mita, do you want to end that? Yeah, share the results for us. So I think avoiding making asks and all of the above came out as top in relation to those, but they all got a little bit. Lowest was preferring to network with own gender, so that's great. So that opens up even more your network if you're able to do that. This is so just have a little reflection yourself and think about your network for a moment. So just what does your current network look like? Where do you have the most contacts and where are the gaps? And do you have people in your network who can help you understand the political landscape? You know, what the current mood music is, what's hot, what's not. And who would speak highly of you to those higher up? They know the value you add and they're going to reference and mention you in the right places, perhaps spot opportunities for you to showcase your value. Who's going to increase your visibility at higher levels? They're able to invite you to meetings and make connections to increase your profile. And do you have people who know what your career aspirations are and are in a position to spot opportunities for you? So hence the importance of sharing your career goals. So not keeping them to yourself, but actually saying what you're looking for and being prepared to do that. And when you're thinking about your strategic network, reflect on whether it's broad. So does it connect to all different kinds of people across departments, different levels, internal, external? Have you got a wide diversity in that network? Research shows that when we're left to our own devices and we're not intentional, we tend to form networks just like me, those sort of convenience networks. So people we like, people we bump into because you work in the same place or you share the same interests. And these convenience networks are not going to give us that diversity of ideas, inputs, information, resources that we need to be effective, particularly at the next level. And our network needs to be connective, so we need to be able to reach beyond your immediate circle to different departments, maybe different organisations, and likewise that contacts can reach through you to connect with groups they wouldn't be able to otherwise. And your network also needs to be dynamic, so it needs to grow as you grow. So not year after year seeking information and advice from the same usual suspects. So are you meeting new people and bringing them into your network? I didn't do this a few years ago, and over a few weeks, nearly all of my strategic network was gone. So we had a reorganisation and some left, some moved to different parts of the business, others moved up and out of my sphere. And I just had to quickly rebuild because I had over-relied on going to the same people. So I hope that's got you thinking. On our programme, there would be a networking activity to think about current networks. But today, just reflect yourself on how you might improve your network. How do you need it to work for you? And we've put that on your worksheet as an area to sort of think about. Okay, Felicia, next topic.
Lovely. So one of the areas that we also explore is politics, and what do we mean by politics? And this is one of the areas that always sort of has very rich discussions, and often the area where women in particular admit that the phrase I use is, I don't do politics. And what I say to them is, when they say that, is that you might not do politics, but everybody else does. So what does that mean in the organisation, and how does that affect your career? So what we get them to sort of think about is why, I suppose, to think about why it is that they find it painful, think it's inauthentic, and that they don't have any time for it. And what we ask them to think about is, actually, in order to advance often in organizations, and that doesn't mean that it's a large corporate organization, it could be a small startup, it could be a scale up, it could be any type of organization, because that's, I think, a misconception I always try to put to one side, to say it only affects corporate organizations. Politics affects every organisation, and we ask them to sort of think about what impact that will have on them in their career, and particularly as they advance as a senior leader. And so what we ask them to think about is, how politically aware are they? And we're going to ask you to rate yourselves just now, and just give us an indication of where you think you are on this sort of continuum.
And this is just one element. We've got lots of elements, haven't we, Felicia,
absolutely,
that we talk about. So we've just picked one for you to think about.
Exactly. Thank you, Orla. So it's really just about thinking about, asking at this point to think about whether you avoid approaching senior leaders or actively positioning yourself favourably, or whether you create and deliberately create opportunities to build relationships with influential people. So what we'd like to just get a sense of is just in the chat, just give us a sense of where you are on that, just so that we can have a sense of that, and just, it's just one of the things that we, as Orla said, it's one of the areas that we ask people to really think about, because an aversion to politics can limit women's progression into leadership positions, because the higher up the career ladder you go, the greater need there is to influence people, and this requires you to be politically savvy. So that's what LHH have found from the research that they've done, that actually women who have political agility are more likely to be successful at progressing their careers. And that's because they've figured out how to get things done. That's essentially how I like to describe it, and it's one of the elements that we look at. So there are areas that we explore with them, and there are
lots of B's in the chat, I was just going to say, but lovely to see some C's as well. So people that have got their political savvy and have thought about it.
Wonderful. So what we explore with participants further is how we can demonstrate our political savvy, and we break it up into three areas. And the first being knowing what and how things get done. So that's really getting them to think about what's valued in your organisation in terms of culture, how are decisions actually made? Because we all know that there are decisions that are made that are not necessarily made in public, if that makes sense. So there's something about how do things get done, and that's really about how do things happen and get done in the culture of your organisation. Then we look at thinking about how you can sort of create a strategic alliances. And this sort of sits well with networking as well. So we ask them to sort of think about that in the context of their networks. Who has influence? Who do I need to know? And most importantly, who needs to know me? So that really sits very well with our networking when we think about exploring and thinking about what networks I have, how valuable they are to me. We ask them to think about that in the context of demonstrating your political savvy. And then we look at the element about choosing your battles wisely, because it's a bit like the scenario where you can't do everything all of the time. So you can't put your all into everything. So sometimes there are some things which we call our red lines, where they really go against the grain, go against what we value, and that might be where you choose a battle and you're not prepared to nudge. But we also ask them to think about, when do I know when to go into battle and when to back down? So not being, if you like, so principled and so value driven on every single element of the job that you do, because that often can have implications. You know, thinking about, am I sensitive myself to others and their priorities, and do I hold a grudge? So actually, am I going into interactions, into communications, into relationship where actually I'm holding on to into a grudge, and do I need to be a bit more politically aware around that? And then the last area that we get them to spend some time on is really thinking about, how do I maintain my credibility and my authenticity? So who am I? Am I collaborative? Do I engender confidence myself? How do I demonstrate that? Am I perceived as somebody who's trustworthy and has integrity? So what we ask them really to think about is that it's not mutually exclusive to be authentic and to also be politically savvy. And that's one of the areas that we know that sometimes women find that sort of has juxtaposition. It's something that they find difficult to reconcile, the idea of being authentic and also having political savvy. And so working it through in those 4 areas we find really helpful in terms of exploring how I can examine my political savviness and be able to demonstrate it in a way that's also authentic for me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Felicia. Felicia, there was a question in the chat that I thought was interesting about the point about building relationships with senior leaders. How do I position myself actively? So I think it would be good to give a few tips. One of the things that came up for me when I saw that question was sometimes it's about getting other people to do that for you. So on your point where you said, who needs to know me? Just think about what senior leaders would it be beneficial for them to know who I am and what I do and how I add value? And then you can think about, how do I actively position? So that could be your manager might position. They might look out for opportunities for you to join meetings or get involved with certain projects where you'll get exposure then to that key person. So that was struck me about that. Anything else, Felicia, around that?
I would add to that. I think that's absolutely it. And I think the other thing that I found when working with senior women is that in terms of being able to, as you say, people getting to know them and getting to know what they do, what contribution they can make, the thing that we can also think about is, if I'm able to demonstrate that, then others can advocate on my behalf. So that's one of the areas that I think really resonates for women, is actually they can sort of step into advocating for themselves, i.e. doing all of those things in terms of, you know, getting senior leaders to know who they are, if they also feel that others can do it for them. But others can't do it for you unless you advocate for yourself to begin with. And that's where that fits well with them in terms of being authentic.
Brilliant. Thanks, Felicia. Okay, let me just cover the last few areas that are in our career activism. So one of them is thinking about our manager. So they're an important stakeholder in our network. So how much do you know about what is important to your manager to be successful themselves? How are they measured and rewarded? What are they going to be paying attention to? What is their reputation? What motivates them? So we get participants to think about, and you might want to do this, do it in your head. So I'm not asking you to put it in the chat, so keep it to yourselves, but just in your head, think about whether you could list 5 things that your manager likes and dislikes. So just quickly off the top of your head, and it will give you a sense of how easy or difficult that would be. Now, obviously, if you've got a new manager, that might be a little bit tricky. But if you've got a manager that you've started to develop a relationship with, how much do you know about how to make your manager be successful? Because the more that you know how to enable them to be successful, the better for you. So really start to think about some of these areas and what you know about your manager. And also linked to that is thinking about expectations. Do you know all of the expectations of you? So there's different levels of expectations. So there's universal expectations, which are standards of behavior, cultural expectations, what the organization is saying it expects of you to work here and be successful. So often that's in culture statements or values or other statements that make it very clear what the universal expectations are. There's also role expectations, so what you need to deliver. So again, this should be obvious and quite traditional. It's what you're expected to do, to achieve on the job. And then there's this last area, which we've called niche expectations. So it's sort of the above and beyond. So these niche expectations are the sort of personal standards, the little things that are important to your manager about the way they like people to work with them or get things done for them. And most managers won't discuss them. They might not even have given them some conscious thought. They're little quirks that have emerged over time and become intuitive to them. So spotting what those are and putting that knowledge into action in every interaction with them can really enhance how you're viewed by them. So just as a little example, a previous manager of mine, I noticed that whenever I went to them with a problem or issue, the first thing they asked me was, well, who have you spoken to? Who have you collaborated with? Who have you drawn in to get ideas from? So it became very clear that collaboration was a really important value and quality for them. So that was a very easy thing to adjust. And so before I went to them, I would do that. So I would check with others, get different views, different viewpoints. And so when I went to them, I was able to say, look, here's the problem or issue, here's who I've collaborated with, and this is where we're stuck. And that really enhanced my standing and that above and beyond with that manager. So small little changes that can make a really big difference. So we get people to think about what some of those niche expectations might be and share those, and that can sometimes trigger people. The best way is to be really present and observe and notice. So really pay attention on purpose to the things that your manager is valuing and paying attention to themselves. And then the final area is profile. So I'm just going to ask you to do a little chat activity. So I'd like you to, let's do this. Just share one thing that you're good at, or something that you're proud of that you've achieved. Let's say last week, because it's only Monday today. So although there might be something today, but either last week. So something you're good at or something that you're proud that you achieved. So we'd love to see some of those appearing in the chat. So profile, when we talk about profile, this is all about thinking about and actively managing your profile and reputation. So for women, it can feel inauthentic to promote themselves positively, and we can tend to play down our achievements. So it's lovely to see these strengths and things that you're proud of coming up in the chat. So collaboration, good at bringing people together, creating structure, presenting to a whole organisation, balancing work and life. Yeah, fantastic. Adding value, being dedicated, fantastic. So it's really important that we get good at knowing what our strengths are and being able to describe those and being able to promote ourselves and our achievements. Because again, this can be one of the headwinds. It can feel a bit inauthentic to promote ourselves positively. And we do tend to hide our light. So just think about how you felt when I asked you to share. Was that something that you were able to do freely and quickly, or did you have that moment where you sort of had to dig a bit deeper? So on the programme, we really look at this. How can we promote ourselves positively in a way that feels authentic for you? So it doesn't feel ick, it does feel comfortable and authentic. So we'll be taking a deeper dive on self-advocacy and managing our profile on the impact and brand session on the 20th of March. So there'll be more to come on this particular area. Brilliant. So that's a quick overview of the 5 areas to be active in. So it's on your worksheet. We've suggested you reflect on what areas you can strengthen further. So Mida, let's just run a quick poll to see from this group that have joined today, what are the areas that you think you need to be proactive in that Felicia and I have shared? So what are the areas that from this first part of the session you might be going away and starting to think a little bit more of, and hopefully we've got you active in that area. So across all of the areas, so hopefully that's been of interest, got you thinking, but I think the standout area is managing your profile and promoting yourself. and then developing a more strategic network. So for those of you that want to focus more on promoting yourself, that impact and brand session will be really useful. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. So in real life, in terms of this programme, that will have brought us up to lunchtime. So we do give everyone a really good hour for lunch to get away from the screen and really stretch their legs and refresh. And then let me hand over to Felicia for what we do after lunch.
Thank you, Orla. So what we do after lunch is to take the participants through one of the tools in terms of exploring their career preferences, as it were. And the tool that we use is Career Anchors, and it was devised by an American academic called Edna Schein. And it really sort of looked at areas that were people's preferences in terms of what, as the word describes, what was their anchor. So what was their career anchor? So there were areas which cover, we can populate them. The areas that were covered were, which we will cover, will be around technical, managerial, entrepreneurial, autonomy, security, service, challenge, and lifestyle. So in terms of this, we're not going to obviously run through the questionnaire with you, but they get this in advance of the workshop. So they get, and we offer pre-work in all of our workshops. And this is one of the pre-works that we ask them to do, which is to complete the questionnaire, and the questionnaire then gives them a score, and then it tells them what their top career anchor is. And really what that gives them is something to sort of think about and reflect on when they think about the career choices that they've made to date and the career choices that they may go ahead and make in the future. So for example, for somebody whose top career anchor is something like challenge, that would be somebody who really needs novelty, variety and difficulty in their work. For somebody who's around perhaps technical, that's really being the technical expert on their particular piece of work and their subject area. For someone where it's lifestyle, that's often one that comes up a lot for women in leadership positions, which is really about finding something around a role, a career that offers them that balance for whatever reason that might be for them at that particular point. And what this does is it gives them the opportunity to think about that in the context of, like I said, where they are now, and most importantly, where they want to get to. And it gives them an opportunity to really think about what might be some of the challenges they're having in their career or had to their career to date. And it may be around their career anchor. And so we get them to do some work on that. We get them to work within groups on that. So they get to explore that more. So they've done that on their own within their pre-work, and then they get an opportunity on the workshop to work with their other participants to really explore that and to answer some questions around that for themselves in terms of their careers now and in the future. We also then ask them to think about their career timeline. That's one of the other exercises they'll get in advance, some pre-work. And we find this exercise really powerful, and people love it. They buddy up with one of our participants, and they really think about how have they got to where they've got to, and what were the factors that influenced their career. And as you can see from this example here, and I think we shared this in the pre-work, didn't we, Orla? On the worksheet, sorry. It really gets you to really think about how did I get to where I got to, and what were some of the key things that were happening for me at that time, whether that's in my personal life or in my professional life, and what impacted on that. And that's really powerful to help them to think about that in the context of where they've got to now. What were the things that worked for them? What were the things that didn't work so well? How does that sit with their career anchors? And we give them a really good opportunity. And often when we're doing this virtually, we ask them to go off screen and to do a walk and talk. So what we try to do with this workshop is we don't have people sort of sat at a screen for the whole time. We want them to be able to sort of, go off screen, talk with their buddies, really sort of build up relationships with the participants on the programme. And this is one of the exercises that does that really well for them.
Brilliant. And I was just going to share an example, Felicia, that when I did my career lifeline, and we encourage you to do some reflection on this, that I realised that I stayed in roles too long, that I started to get bored or unchallenged, but stayed too long before moving on. So that was a really good learn for me when I looked back. So it's really a useful tool to get some of those insights. And then also you talked about career anchors. My career anchor is autonomy. And I realised that some roles that I had taken didn't allow me enough freedom and autonomy. So it helped me in terms of future choices I made about things I took on or roles that I took. So it was an important factor.
Yeah, and likewise for me, mine was autonomy and lifestyle, and it in terms of I think I had 2 joint anchors, and actually that helped me to make decisions about my sort of career going forward, and that's why I set up and started working independently and started doing the work that I do, and it was really about thinking about how could I match those 2 things, which is yes, being autonomous, but also having work that I enjoyed and also gave me that balance that I needed at that time. So yeah, I can see that how it works. Okay, and then what we ask them to do is to think about careers in terms of direction and options. So this is really about thinking about what are my options with regards to my career. And we take them through this model and really just ask them to think about, what does vertical mean for me? So vertical is very much, we take them through it and we do a description of it. And vertical is what I referred to right at the beginning about upwards movement in an organisation and how that's becoming less and less common. And so we ask them to really think about that in the context of whether that's something that might be an option for them in their organisation or going forward. And so what other options do we have? Lateral. That's really about them thinking about making moves. And one of the things that we ask them to think about is a lateral move, to think about that in the context of how that can enhance your career. It may not be that you're flatlining. You're actually not necessarily moving up, but you're broadening your experience. And you're exploring other areas. Then we talk about enrichment, which could be around sort of thinking about deepening your experience or thinking about further training, something that sort of gives you some more context and depth. Exploration is really thinking about that in the same scenario, really thinking about that in the context of, what direction do I want to go in that's going to broaden my experience, give me more breadth and more depth. When we talk about relocation, we're really talking about potentially you moving out of an organisation. We ask people to think about that in the context of what might happen to us through no choice of our own, and what that means in terms of perhaps when there's a redundancy situation, or when you actually decide that you're going to leave of your own volition, what does that mean? And then we look at realignment, which is really thinking about a little bit about sort of bringing together enrichment and exploration and thinking about how I can realign my career. So we get them to then think about, okay, what does that mean in terms of my plan? And what does my career plan look like? And this is where we give them a really decent chat time on the programme, in the actual module, to really think about my career in my short, medium, long term. And we ask them to think about that in terms of their SMART goals. And what we give them an opportunity to do with this is, again, to think about that on your own. So we give them some time, and this is also part of their pre-work, to think about on your own what might be my sort of 6 to 12 month goals, my 2 to 3 year goal, and my 5-year goals. And we give them, I'm not sure whether this is on this slide, we give them a sort of an outline for them to work from in terms of a template. So we give them another tool, which gives them the opportunity to think about what are the different elements that will, if you like, contribute to my career, inform my career decision planning. Is that about management? Is it about leadership? What experience do I need? What exposure do I need? Who do I need to perhaps get some more time with? Where do I need to get further information from? Whether that's internal, external to the organisation, and we get them to do that as an exercise often with their buddy or with a partner in the programme. And that's what we cover in terms of, if you like, the last section of the programme, and that's where we end them. I always think on a high, which is very much on thinking about what are my aspirations, and how do I keep those current? How do I keep those in development conversations? So we ask them to think about this in the context of who needs to know about my career plan, and making sure that they share that with their line managers or those who are responsible for their development.
Brilliant. Thanks, Felicia. So those of you that are listening today, we talk through what we do on the programme, but for your reflections, maybe you could start to think about what is your career anchor from the ones that we described, and how would that change the choices you might make about next roles or areas. Think about your career lifeline and what you've learned about your career progressions and when that's worked really well for you. And then think wider. What Felicia was saying there was try to think wider about options. So not just vertical, but all sorts of different aspects, enriching your role, lateral moves, maybe just exploration, going and trying and looking for something different, and looking across the organisation. So on your worksheet, if you can reflect on today, how do you see your career developing over the next 3 to 5 years? If you could really have it all, what would be your ideal progression? So just forget about all the barriers and just think, if it was the ideal, what career move would you make if you knew you couldn't fail? Is there anything holding you back? What are the career options open to you? Vertical, lateral, enriching? And so why not you, and why not now? Why not make that first step? And really think about who can support you in your thinking over the next couple of weeks. So I mentioned at the beginning about finding a buddy. Think about who are 2 people who can help you reach your goals, or who you can seek constructive feedback from about your career in the next week or so. That would be a fantastic action to take away from this session. And just as we come to the end, I just want to come back to the session for managers and the importance of their understanding and support for participants. So we either create a recorded webinar or run a live session, and we start by asking, what, if anything, do people leaders adapt when developing women to get them thinking? So as well as researching the behaviours and beliefs of women who excel, we've also identified 10 specific behaviours that leaders who are champions of gender diversity are twice as likely to demonstrate. So really helping managers understand how they can be good allies and support women in the workplace is a critical lever in elevating women. And obviously supporting women's career activism that we've talked about today is one of those career areas that allies can really support women with. And we'll be covering this more on our allyship session in a few weeks on the 18th of March. So that brings us to the end of our first session. Lots more next week. While I tell you about that, please do complete the evaluation for today. So Mita's just going to run a poll just so that we can get a sense of how useful you found today. We look forward to welcoming you back next week. So my colleagues Colette and Madeline will be running this session. I'll be back a bit later, so I'm adding strategic value. But they will be covering strengthening confidence and resilience. So they'll also be sharing how the discovery sessions are run, and they'll be talking about the Strength Scope tool we use, as well as guest speakers. So we've got a guest speaker, Sinead, joining, who'll share a little bit about what it's like to be a guest speaker and some of the things that are important to her in sharing her story. And in terms of takeaways from today, as I say, you've got your worksheet for reflection. So I hope this has started your thinking. We'll be sending out our research report, which details the behaviours and beliefs of women who excel, as well as the behaviours of gender champions. And you'll also get our ebook, which outlines some of the headwinds for women. So if you'd like to get in touch or contact us, you can do that on ewill@lhh.com. Thanks, Felicia, for sharing your insights today. We are going to stay on, so we're on for another 3 or 4 minutes, so we can answer some questions, Q&A for the last few minutes. If you're heading off, we hope you'll join us again next week. But if you want to stay for a couple of minutes, we'll just answer any questions and answers. So Mida, was there anything that came up I can see 3 in the Q&A button. Is there anything that would be useful for Felicia and I to cover in the last couple of minutes?
Yeah.
Thanks for all your thanks, everyone.
I've seen a question. What is the age frame you are looking at having in these workshops?
Oh, well, that's a good question. So I would say this program is targeted more at mid-level managers. So I would say it's not early careers. So we have something else for early careers. So we tend to do just webinars for that. So that age is probably 20s. So it's just before that first step up into management position. And that's really important because that is actually what they call the broken rung. So the first step up, we're not getting parity. So even on the first promotions up into those management roles, more men are moving up than women. So I think it's like for every 100, there's 85 men move forward. So there's definitely that broken rung difference. So that's the sort of 20s to 30s. So that's more webinar based. So this mid-level, I would say it runs anything from sort of late 20s through, to wherever. It's that mid-level range. The demographics are really wide. It's more about the level that you are in the organisation. We find that this programme works best for anyone who is feeling stuck, feeling that they can't progress and they're not sure how to move their career on. Is that the same for you, Felicia, age range?
I think it's interesting. So I think you're absolutely right, Orla, in terms of the middle. And so some of that middle management could be much younger than traditionally we might think. And that's why I wouldn't put an age on it. It's really, like you said, Orla, it's about where they are in their career, because on a programme I'm running currently, the age range is much lower than perhaps traditionally have been on the programme, but that's because of the nature of the organisation, and it's a much younger organisation, and therefore the people in that range will be much younger. So I think looking at it in terms of where they are in their careers is probably easier.
Yeah,
and I
think level rather than age.
Exactly that. And I think it really enriches it now because you've got younger females on these programmes at an earlier stage.
Brilliant.
And that can be quite powerful. It's brilliant, actually. That can be quite powerful in terms of how they see the world, and giving them the opportunity really early on, really, for them to sort of think about themselves differently in terms of how they show up. Yeah, love it.
Mida, any others?
There was one question, sorry, in case you haven't seen it, it says, do we think we should invite men in our companies to attend the Allies session?
Yes, definitely. Yes, please. Yes, open to everyone.
I want to say that, because I think the answer is yes.
Yes. And welcome to these sessions, because obviously, all of the, and we sometimes get asked that, don't these topics also apply to men? Yeah. And of course, yes, they do. However, men are doing very well because they are getting into those roles. So as I said right at the beginning, this is about focusing on those areas most relevant to women. And of course they would benefit men as well. So everyone is welcome. It's just we're focusing and putting at the women's lens on these topics. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you all for attending and for all your contributions. Hopefully we'll see you all again soon.
Bye.
Enjoy the rest of the day.